What if the future of philanthropy isn't driven by a few major donors, but by communities of everyday people coming together to give with purpose? Welcome to Money to Give with me, Rick Peck, the philanthropy guy. With over 20 years in the nonprofit sector, I have seen hundreds of millions of dollars transferred from donors to nonprofits. I've learned a lot along the way that I want to help convey to you, my loyal listeners. In this podcast series, we talk about 1, how nonprofits can most effectively showcase their mission and vision and raise as much money as possible. 2, how donors and potential donors can make the greatest impact possible in the world. And 3, how professional advisors, including philanthropy advisors, can offer the most up-to-date information and services to their clients. So join us here each episode for more of that giving feeling. In today's episode, I sit down with Emily Rasmussen to explore the growing movement of giving circles and why they are shaping and reshaping how we think about generosity, community, and impact. From democratizing philanthropy to creating spaces where people can learn, connect, and give together, this model is opening the door for more individuals to see themselves as philanthropists. We also discuss how giving circles are helping nonprofits navigate funding uncertainty, build stronger relationships with donors, and create more sustainable, recurring support. This is a conversation about connection, collaboration, and the power of collective generosity. Let's begin. So Emily, giving circles are known for diversifying and democratizing philanthropy. Can you share more on why this is important and how giving circles are doing this?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thank you for the question. So giving circles are a movement of everyday people that we call it a grassroots movement where people came together organically to pool their donations and collaborate to give larger gifts as a collective. And so it really has been a movement of people coming together organically and collaborating, often with a kind of democratic angle where anyone who joins can donate into the pool, can nominate nonprofits, and everyone votes. It's a very typical model to give money away. So, some people call giving circles schools of democracy, actually, which is, I think, a fascinating concept, especially as we think about, what does it mean to live in a democracy and how do you learn those skills and exercise those skills in various ways. But the other thing with giving circles being a tool, a model that is diversifying and democratizing philanthropy, is that we often see in philanthropy that a lot of the tools and the systems that have been built are for larger, higher net worth donors and foundations, right? And so what that means is that there's a lot of support and education and training and tools and financial vehicles for people with more resources to give. But there isn't as much for everyday people who might not be giving $1 million at a time or a year. And I think because of that, sometimes people can feel like, oh, I'm not a philanthropist, right? I don't have enough money to give away to be a philanthropist. And a big part of this giving circle movement is to say that we're all philanthropists. Anyone can give, right? But I think there's part of it making people aware that they can give and they can give in a meaningful, impactful way. And this model really gives people a clear path that's very welcoming, that's very can be very educational and supportive as people are embarking perhaps for the first time into philanthropy and learning from each other and other people like them and how to discover nonprofits and give to nonprofits in a way that's relatable for them, and also in a way that is accessible because they might not have the resources to be able to pay a philanthropic advisor, for example, to help them decide how to give resources away and how to make a difference. So for those reasons, we think of it as being a very a democratizing model, engaging a broader range of people and a broader diversity of people as a result. And, just a couple of reasons why we think that's really important is because what we see in a lot of the research is that who gives really does matter when we look at where money goes. And so it's important to have all of our different perspectives helping to direct funds, because if you care about a cause or you care about a community, you need to help share that with others, right? And direct funds to support it, because chances are that big P philanthropy might not recognize that cause in the same way. And so just one quick example on that is that uh, generally, broadly, the philanthropic sector, roughly 2% of funding of philanthropic dollars in the US has gone to support women and girls. Well, when we look at giving circles, which at this point are roughly 70 to 80% women, according to a few different studies, we see that women and girls are often the most selected cause area that they're supporting, and at least in the top three, according to some studies. So it really does matter, who's giving in terms of where that money goes, what gets supported in our communities.
Wow, that's fascinating. There's so much in what you said. I mean, the idea of almost like training wheels for people who are saying, I don't even know where to start. I wouldn't know how to sit down and have a conversation about this. No one's really acclimated me to this conversation, maybe, in my whole life. And also the fact that when you're saying they're going to be maybe focusing on things that other people wouldn't be focusing on, it sounds like almost like that's the organic quality of a giving circle, is that we get to choose how those conversations go. We do it together. There's no judgment. We're kind of learning together, and we're kind of feeling what it feels like. Hopefully, some joy in making a difference, but also maybe understanding like, why are we choosing that organization? Or so women and girls. So like, what women and girls opportunities are out there, and why, how do we dissect that maybe over time? Maybe as a giving circle becomes more mature, they start to dive down maybe into deeper levels of what that means. So yeah, I appreciate that. And like you said, sometimes they just don't have the money to be able to hire someone to help them do that. So, I can't help but think as you're talking, it sounds like there's no age entry point. In other words, you could be pretty young and you could be fairly old and join a giving circle. There's no graduation level, right? So just on that topic, like how young do you see people joining a giving circle, and how old do you see people joining a giving circle?
Yeah, I mean, it really does run the gamut. We see that on average, according to a couple of studies of the broader field, I think the baby boomer age bracket was the most popular, or the most typical age range for a giving circle member. But what we've seen in some of our smaller studies of sample sets from the Grapevine platform that hosts giving circles is that the most often cited age range is Gen X. And
Okay.
so, and in addition to that, we've seen just a really nice wave of younger generation giving circles getting started. And a lot of these more established giving circles really putting time and effort into wanting to engage the next generation. And so it's been exciting to watch. I think we'll continue to see that age range drop in a sense as we get more and more of these younger communities involved. And the way they're doing that is often they're seeing their mother's giving circle, right? Or their father's group, or something to that effect. And they're thinking, oh, I'd love to do that, but I want to do that with my friends. And I want to do
Right.
that a little bit different, right? We're going to bring our friend who's a DJ to come in and to our next event and DJ as part of that gathering. And so they're kind of taking this model and running with it, making their own in some ways, and using technology in more ways as well. But then in other cases, we actually see some of those more established groups either helping those younger groups to set up their own and helping them structure it, or providing scholarships in a sense to invite them in to join their giving circle. So even if they don't have the financial means to join a more established group that asks members to give $400 a year or $1,000 a year, they'll have other members cover that for them for a certain period of time so they can get that experience and exposure, and that group can benefit from that additional perspective from those younger members.
Yeah, that's helpful. I actually talked to somebody who was, I would say, a millennial, and he said, when we were talking, I felt like he had a very mature viewpoint. He's about 27,
Hmm.
very mature viewpoint around how he thought about philanthropy, but he also was inheriting a lot of money. So he was fortunate in that way, and he was very respectful of that. He was very thoughtful about it. But at one point we were talking, he goes, I think my friends should be involved in this. They should be talking about this. And so it goes back to the who's inviting them to the table, who's inviting
Yes.
them to have this conversation. I said to him, because it was being hosted by this wealth advisory firm at the time. And I said, well, I'm sure that the wealth advisory firm would be happy to have you bring your friends. And so anyway, the point being is that how do you get people to come and talk about it? Do they even know what to say? Do they even know what they would begin to think about? So your point about modeling, that maybe their parents are doing something or somebody else is doing, and they say, okay, I understand how this works now. I see how a giving circle works. Now
Yeah.
I'm going to go and create our own with this particular age group, and maybe we can invent what it looks like for us to give in the way that we would like to give. But at least it allows some space for people to do that, where otherwise they might feel like they're doing it on their own or not at all, right?
Completely. And you just sparked another thought for me, which is that in some of these cases with advisors, for example, whether it's a philanthropic advisor or a financial advisor, we're seeing them kind of orchestrate these giving circles as experiences with their clients. And in some cases, and this isn't just in the advisory space, I'm seeing this with companies as well, orchestrating giving circles with employees. And in some cases, those are giving circles with parents and children. And so this is I think a really, even younger than the younger kids, the high schoolers and the college kids we're seeing start their own groups. We're seeing parents engage in a giving circle that's specifically designed for them to bring a child with them. And now they're in a giving circle with many other parent-child pairs, right? And in this experience, then the parents can connect with that child more deeply around philanthropy, but also that child can connect with other kids, roughly their age range, right? And so they're getting that peer experience as well as that experience with the parent that can be really powerful for the modeling and for just the learning and experience.
Yeah, and I think there's a few dimensions to even that, because I can see that sort of parents are looking at other parents and saying, well, this is good. We're kind of all doing this together, which is great. And then I would think the kids would see the other kids and go, okay, we're kind of in this together. We're doing this together. And then I think there's also the conversation that the parent and the child has when they leave the giving circle. They go home, and on the drive home or at the supper table or what have you, they're being like, hey, let's break that down. Did you remember that conversation? They talked about this. So I can just see it being relatable on all these different levels, like peer-to-peer parents, peer-to-peer children, and then parent and child, and just the stimulating conversations they would have. And then they go back to the giving circle again and kind of reinforce this positive energy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there
Yeah.
are families, by the way, that are doing this themselves. They're not even
Hmm.
doing this as part of something that an advisor or someone else is helping to facilitate for them. But we have many giving circles on the Grapevine platform, for example, that are families. Whether it's a family of 5 or a family of, a larger extended family across the country, families are coming together and pooling their resources, or maybe there's a larger kind of benefactor within the family putting the more resources into the pool, but then engaging the entire family in these discussions around what do we value, what do we want to support, and so everyone gets to connect around this giving back.
Yeah, that's great. And they maybe also a safe space for them to say, well, we just want to have this conversation amongst our family right now, and then we can maybe make it broader after that. Maybe some people want to be more private around their philanthropy. They don't necessarily want to share it, or maybe they're still a little bit frightened or scared or something, and they just want to keep it within the family. So that's fascinating, all those different levels of what you just described. So, I mean, we're talking about it a little bit, but let's just, when you think about giving circles, you're bringing people together in communities. What do they have as a role to play in addressing some of the societal issues that we're facing around things like loneliness or declining trust or other types of things like that?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. And I would say it's something we've always known with giving circles, that they do bring people together. They build connection and community. Often these giving circles are located in a particular geography, right? So in Brooklyn, in Reno, in Tampa. And so they're bringing people together in a physical space. And that leads to deeper connections and a sense of belonging. In fact, there is a study that came out from the Johnson Center of Philanthropy last year on the state of the giving circle field, and they showed that 91% of people who participated in a giving circle that responded to this survey said it increased their sense of belonging to community.
Mm,
Right.
yeah.
And so when we think about some of these issues you just raised, the loneliness epidemic, the disconnect we have in our society right now, and some of the polarization that's leading to some of that, and some of the decline in trust that we're seeing, both with individuals and with organizations, right? This is these are all connected, and so what giving circles can do is they can bring people together in a really positive, pro-social way that deepens that connection and also can help bridge across differences. And I think that's a really important thing to note here too, right? It's not only bringing people together that are like-minded in all the ways, but it's bringing people together. I heard this term recently, that are like-hearted in that they care, right? But they might have different perspectives, and that's part of the value of this model, that it does facilitate that. And we've actually seen in some of the other research just around this topic, around belonging and connection, that people want more of that. People want to connect across difference, but when they think about that, they want to do that in a more structured form, right? They want some kind of facilitation in a way, or some kind of structure, I guess, through which they can engage effectively. And I think this giving circle model provides that kind of really positive structure that enables that connecting.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm also thinking, as you're talking around the idea that when you talk about different perspectives or, polarization, I'm actually thinking more in terms of you can come to the table and have a certain viewpoint about something and somebody else just has a different viewpoint. It's not necessarily the polar opposite of what you were saying, but it's just different. And
Mhm.
so, and maybe you can talk it out and people say, I never thought about approaching it that way, or I
Mhm.
never thought about it from that point of view. Maybe somebody, for example, is coming at it and they have no knowledge of the topic. And somebody else says, oh, I know this topic really well. I grew up, I was an orphan, or I grew up and we were homeless, or I grew up and we had this happened to us. So I know how that feels, and I'm here because now I'm in a different place now, and I can be able to help out. So that sort of being close to that topic can also be interesting, because it might be Democrats and Republicans coming together, but it's just really more about the topic of, like, what does this mean to have this particular topic affect you or
Yes,
affect your family, and just that additional perspective. I
completely. I
what
think, oh, sorry, Rick, I was just going to say,
No.
I completely agree with that. It's that lived experience that people can bring to this, right? Not some people do. I mean, and now everyone has access to most people have access to the internet. I shouldn't say everyone does, but so people are able to read up on causes and issues. People are able to bring a lot of knowledge to these conversations and do. A big part in addition to that, what we see though, is that lived experience piece. This is how this issue directly affected me. I grew up, hungry, and this is how these organizations or this type of service really enabled me to make it through that period of life and make it to this next stage. And we just see that kind of experience being so powerful. Even big P philanthropy, right? Even large foundations are trying to figure out how can they engage in participatory philanthropy? How can they connect and get even closer to the people who are closest to the issues so that they can even more effectively distribute their dollars? And so it's a really powerful part of this model, I think, that you're tapping into there.
Yeah, that's so interesting. What about, I'm going to kind of go in the opposite direction for a second. Is it not effective to have giving circles that are virtual?
Oh, we have many that are virtual.
Okay. Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah. I think so. Traditionally, Giving Circles started in the early 80s here in the US, although they certainly have roots that go back centuries to cultures globally, right? But this modern Giving Circle movement, it's been sort of organized and categorized here in the US, started in the 80s by women across the country, and they were primarily coming together in their local communities and pooling their resources to give back to a broad range of causes in their local neighborhood, or local towns, et cetera. As the movement has continued to grow, though, we're seeing that diversify. And so we're seeing a broader range of people getting involved, and we're seeing more people starting giving circles that are cause-based, not just geographically based, but geographically spread out, which requires, in many cases, for them to leverage technology and come together virtually because they have members all over the place. And then we actually started with the Grapevine platform to support giving circles in March of 2020, just as we were all heading into that COVID era. And so a big part of our work was helping all these groups, even those that are hyper local, that were coming together and doing everything in person, helping them to adopt technology to make it easier for them to do their work. And critically, at that point, continue their work so that they didn't have to meet in person to still move these funds to organizations.
Yeah, that totally makes sense, because otherwise I can't even imagine in a year like 2020 giving stopping or conversations stopping when arguably they needed them the most, right? They
Exactly.
needed to keep those things going at a time of great need. Wow. So let's talk about this past year. Nonprofits have gone through a very tumultuous year with a lot of funding cuts and insecurity. Again, thinking about like federal funding cuts.
Right.
What role would you say giving circles play in helping nonprofits to fuel the missions?
hmm Well, one, they're still there. They're still giving. There weren't funding cuts from the giving circles, right? And so they are continuing to pool money and give. And two, we are seeing more and more giving circles being created in response to funding cuts, in response to certain causes and communities um, being affected by that disproportionately. And so giving circles popping up directly to support this community or that cause in response to that. So it really is this community-driven movement to support the causes and the issues that are important, that is helping us to step in to some of these gaps. I think the other thing to note is that in the past year, what we've seen at Grapevine is a lot of nonprofits now are struggling with fundraising as a result of this. And to be fair, there's been some challenges with fundraising, for some years prior to that as well. So this has all kind of been building. Um, and as a result of that, and I think what I sense is a greater drive at this moment to really go outside the norm, think outside the box, find alternatives. Um, all of that is kind of aligning, I think, with the rise of giving circles and people being more aware of them. And so what we have seen is more and more nonprofits reaching out, wanting to learn, what is a giving circle exactly? I've heard about it. What does that mean? How do I find them and connect with giving circles that might be interested in supporting my work? And so we've been doing a lot of training and support, helping them to connect with the global directory to find giving circles and figure out how they can, be considered for a grant. And then in addition to that, we're seeing nonprofits actually thinking about how they can leverage this model of community and connection to build their own version of a giving circle, which I think is really exciting to see that just organically bubbling up. And now we're learning from those nonprofits who have taken that initiative and that have built these thriving communities of recurring donors, and trying to share more of those stories out there to help other nonprofits learn from that and also get involved. Just one quick stat on this that we learned earlier this year. The Data Commons team from Giving Tuesday came out with a report earlier this year that showed that on average, just 2% of new donations to nonprofits are set up to recur.
Okay.
However, on Grapevine, more than 50% are set up to recur.
Wow.
So that's where we see, okay, there's a big gap here, and we think that this giving circle model where you're changing what the offer is, right? You're inviting people to join a community, not just to make a donation. It's not just a transactional experience, it's a connected experience. We think there's a lot that nonprofits can learn from and leverage there to build their own communities of recurring donors even more effectively.
That's fascinating. It's something I really hadn't thought about, because sometimes when I think about giving circles, I think you keep pivoting to something else. But what you're saying is you're almost like stacking on top of it. You're saying, we're going to give to this organization sustainably, and then we're going to move on to another organization, maybe give to them sustainably. So it's not like this was the flavor of the month, right? We gave it to you and then we're done. We're actually committing to you more long term. So it sounds like in that case, are you seeing that people are going from X number of dollars and maybe doubling and so on? Or are these new donors that are coming in and acting sustainably? I'm just trying to wonder if I'm a member of a giving circle, is the expectation for me to continue to stack on more, which is not a bad thing, stack on more and more sustainable monthly donations, or am I really relying on other members to start their own monthly sustainable donations? Like how would that work exactly?
Well, so I have this view that we should all be in a giving circle, if not two or three, but we could expand that to 5 or 10, right? Like, I do think it's a very, um, compelling model, a compelling way to give, and the value and the learning and the connection that you get from it, is wonderful. So, you could be in a giving circle, giving back to your local community, one supporting a cause that you really care about, as well as one supporting that particular nonprofit that you really are connected to and believe in. And so, in that way, I do think that there's a lot of room for stacking of these recurring donations, as you say. Um, but I think one clarification there is that on the nonprofit side, what we're seeing is that nonprofit itself starting the giving circle. And so in that way, the group they're bringing together, everyone is there to support that one nonprofit, in it forever if you want. I mean, they're not planning to move the money necessarily, or the group isn't planning to shift at some point their focus away from that nonprofit. However, within that group, they might be encouraged to learn about a few different programs and then decide as a group which one they want to support with their pooled funds. Right? We see this as a way that these nonprofits are building that sense of agency with that donor community within a group that's where all the funds are going to support their work. But what we see with these giving circles, we've asked tens of thousands of people who have joined giving circles on Grapevine, why did you join? And the number one reason people join is to connect with other people. The second most often cited reason is to amplify my impact, right? It's like if I don't have that much money, but if I pool my $100 with 100 other people, now we have a $10,000 gift. Now I can be part of something that feels much more robust and impactful. Both of those things you can get from being in a giving circle that's dedicated to a specific nonprofit. You don't necessarily have to give to many different nonprofits.
Hmm,
So
I see.
yeah, so it's still an earlier, I would say, nascent use case, but it is one that we're seeing more and more of, I think, largely driven from the need this year. And I think it's an exciting opportunity for nonprofits.
Yeah, for sure. And the fact that they could come back and say, this is the impact of that $10,000 gift, like you said, versus that $100 gift, that's a different narrative
Right.
from the nonprofit to say, this is what we did with that.
Yep.
Also, the fact about bringing people together. When I worked at a community foundation, I remember we'd have some virtual meetings, and it was absolutely fascinating to me to see people come forward who are, I would call seasoned givers.
Hmm.
But what they were doing is they were saying, well, what are other people doing? What are they up to? I want to learn from them too. I'm not so in my own bubble to think that I couldn't learn from somebody else. And I'd seen people jump from like not necessarily being interested in a certain topic to all of a sudden being like, you know what? I think that's actually really important because
Yeah,
I heard from this other person say something that it stimulated my need to want to learn more about that. Where coming into the conversation, it wasn't on my radar. So, I mean, I think there's so much to what you're saying around that discussion, that conversation that makes people feel like not only are we having a good conversation about it together, then we're pooling our money together and doing something big with it. And then we'll see what happens. We'll see where that goes, right? Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. And I think that brings us back even to what we were talking about earlier, which is democratizing philanthropy, right? A lot of nonprofits actually are used to bringing donors together on their board, bringing donors together in that high net worth, higher giving capacity council or group. But it's harder to do that when it's a group of donors that are $100 per donor, right? $50 per donor. And so the democratization is also providing those nonprofits with a scalable model where they can more effectively engage with donors at a variety of financial levels and provide that same kind of connection and community that every donor wants, whether they're giving $50 or $50,000.
Right. It's true. They want to feel connected to community. They want to feel connected to impact. They want to know that something good's happening from this conversation, right? It's not going into the ether or that they're not necessarily valued as a donor, right? That's, because I do hear that a little bit in the nonprofit world. They're not always saying thank you. They're not always engaging people. So this allows a deeper level of engagement that they might not otherwise get if they were just a sole $50 donor to a
Exactly.
cause that they're not necessarily even that connected to. So,
Exactly.
yeah. So let's talk more about Grapevine, specifically working in the space. What do you think is unique about it?
Well, Grapevine is the only real infrastructure partner in this movement. We like to think of ourselves as your go-to partner for giving circles, We have a custom platform that supports any giving circle with everything they need. We like to call it an all-in-one solution for giving circles. So if you're interested in starting one in just a couple of minutes, you can set up a community page where you can invite members in and you can communicate and collaborate. We have features like nominating nonprofits, voting on nonprofits, organizing volunteering events or grant making events. So all of the kind of community building, connecting, right, and collaboration tools are there. In addition, we have all of the donation processing, charitable tax receipting, and grant making tools. So it's almost like a donor advised fund backend system for each of these giving circles so they can pool money into that group pool. Everyone gets their tax receipt, and then they have time to decide, okay, now that we've pooled our $10,000, right, where are we going to give it? And then we can take care of the granting and getting it to those nonprofits and tracking that for them. So that's the core platform offering that we have. It's free for anyone to start a group and build their community there. And then in addition to that, we have a lot of programming, wraparound programming to support leaders through cohort programs and leader workshops, member mixers, things like that, just to help connect people across circles and connect the movement. And then I would say one thing we've been doing more of recently is working even more directly with organizations, whether they're companies wanting to start employee-led giving circles for their teams, or advisors wanting to create giving circles for their clients and maybe their clients' children, as we talked about. We provide some of that training and wraparound like support, facilitation, etc.
Yeah, it sounds like you're just building that back office infrastructure for them to just lean in and do what they can do best without having to worry about the logistics of it all. But you're also teaching them maybe to have those conversations as well. It's kind of like anything you need to know about a giving circle. Sounds like Grapevine will help you with that conversation. Will also help you with obviously all the logistics. So it's so they don't have to worry about it or am I doing this right? And they can be like, oh, Grapevine's going to teach me how to make sure I do this well. And I'm sure you're constantly learning as an organization to say, well, which are the quote unquote more successful giving circles? What are they doing? And then people can aspire to that type of a giving circle. You know, these are the ones that are, or maybe here's a history lesson on how they've evolved. This one started at this date with this many people, and then it evolved to this many people, and they're doing this now. And people might go, oh, I want to aspire to that. I want our giving circle to get to that point. Maybe gives us something to shoot for, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we as a platform, we host now over 1,100 active giving circles across the country, almost 100,000 members. And our community's moved over $53 million now to almost 8,000 nonprofits. So we have, to your point, there's a lot of activity on the platform, and from that, so much learning where we are learning from these leaders, and we see one group doing really well here, and we go and we talk to the leader, we look at the data, you know, we try to share those learnings then out with other groups, and also provide additional features and recommendations to groups more broadly based on those learnings to help them be successful.
Yeah, that's great. You know, I'm going to give you a side question. What are the smallest giving circles? How many people are part of a giving circle at the low end, and what are the largest giving circles you've seen?
Well, in the smallest, I would say they're small groups of people, families, book clubs. Those are groups that I would say are less than 10 people. You know, you might have just 3 or 4 or 5 people in a group like that.
Okay.
On the high end, I think the largest giving circle we've hosted on the Grapevine platform has been over 600 people.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's definitely a high end and a bit of an outlier. I would say we have more groups that are in the 100 to 200 people. And this is a very typical model we see actually, where people will come together to pool $100 each every quarter with the goal of getting at least 100 people to contribute. So with 100 people and $100 each, that means we're giving away a $10,000 check to a different nonprofit every quarter. Right?
Yeah,
I think
wow.
that's a really powerful model because basically every member donates roughly the cost of one lunch per month, but collectively we're moving $40,000 per year to 4 different nonprofits, which is really, you know, meaningful.
Very meaningful. Yeah, and bigger than I thought. I thought you were going to say the average size is like 30 or 40, but that's more like 100. That's because the reason I say that is because it almost feels like, wow, this is a real movement here. You get 100 people involved. That's just impressive on any level, to have a group meeting that regularly or staying connected that regularly, sustainably, right?
Yes. And I would just clarify one thing there, which is the most typical giving circle we see is one that aspires to this 100-member goal. However, the last study that we looked at on the Grapevine platform, the average was about 80 members.
Okay.
And that's a little dated, so I'd have to get some updated numbers for you. But I would say the average, that is higher than the average. I think a lot of groups, might be more in the 60 to 80 member range. But these do tend to be those groups that are in a location and people are trying to connect in person. And so there's that added value, of being able to connect. And I think that added goal of being able to go to a gathering, see people but also meet some new people. So because
Yeah.
of that, the groups tend to, organically grow a bit more than some of the smaller family book clubs or, a group that you or I might create to bring our friends together and give back together.
Yeah. That's still impressive. I mean, 60 to 80 is still, that's impressive in the sense that they keep coming back and they keep interacting. And maybe that, like you said, there's something exciting about that. Like when you're getting to those levels, I can't miss this. I want to be part of this.
Right.
This is really, we're starting to move the needle here as a group. So, well, I have one last question for you. Where do you see this movement going, and what's the role you're playing in building that future?
Yeah, I really see this model of collaborative philanthropy, of people coming together and giving together as the future of philanthropy. And I think we see a lot of different versions of collective philanthropy now where you get a sense of that, where people are hungry for this kind of giving and support, and where nonprofits, need that more than ever with all of the funding shifts that we're seeing. And so I think a recent example of that actually is Giving Tuesday, another record-breaking year this year on Giving Tuesday, movement of everyday people. So I do see it continuing to grow, and I see more and more people continuing to get into the Giving Circle movement. And with that, I think we'll see a broader diversity of people, of age ranges, of financial capacities, of interest areas. And I think we'll see a broader range of types of giving circles, whether you want to be location specific or cause specific or maybe open-ended. It's, there are lots of different ways to think about organizing your goals and your structure for a group. So I do think we're going to continue to just see general organic kind of community-led growth. In addition to that, though, these areas I mentioned earlier, where organizations are getting involved, companies starting giving circles to engage their employees. I think we're just at the very early days of that. I think we're going to see a lot more of that as companies continue to want to build more connection and belonging between their teams, especially with remote work and needing more flexible ways to do that. So I think that's going to be a big is a growing area, is going to continue to grow. And then again, on the nonprofit side, I think we're going to see more and more nonprofits getting involved. One being more active participants with existing giving circles, right? Sharing impact updates, thinking about giving circles as an actual source of potential funds for them to add to their fundraising strategy, right? So for our fundraising for this year, we're thinking about potentially government grants. We're thinking about private foundations. We're thinking about individuals, and we're thinking about giving circles. What's our strategy for each of these? So I think we're going to see more of that coming in, which I think will be great because I think those nonprofits can add a lot of value in terms of impact and content and experiences to these groups. And then I think we'll also see more and more of them then adopting models like this to build their own collaborative, donor circles, donor collaborative groups, whatever they want to call them, fundraising circles. The nonprofits, use a variety of terms for this, but I think we'll see more and more of that, and it'll be important for them in order to keep growing their donor bases and keeping them engaged.
Yeah, fascinating. And I think what you're doing is you're showing that there is a sustainable model here. This is how you start one. This is what the more successful ones look like, and gaining that credibility, if that's the right word, of what a giving circle offers, versus it feeling like maybe it's little too loose or unstructured, but no, there's a formula for what a good giving circle looks like. There's a whole support backbone to what you're looking for. And as you say, then they're going to get more and more of a spotlight where people say, hey, this is actually a constituency, a model that is not something that maybe we were thinking about before. But now looking at the results and looking at the data, it's why, how can we possibly ignore it? Especially based on the numbers you just gave about the millions of dollars that are going out and on a quarterly level. You can't ignore it. It's really impressive.
Completely agree. And I'll just add to that, that in this study from the Johnson Center of Philanthropy last year, we saw that giving circles are now the fastest growing form of philanthropy
Hmm.
and have engaged over 370,000 people as of a little over a year ago. And over the 5-year period prior to that study having come out, had moved $3.1 billion to nonprofits.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
it's when you think about everyday donors and that the average gift is $100, $500, $1,000 at a time, when collectively we're pulling those resources and giving, it can add up to a very, large number. And I think we're still just in the very earliest days of this.
Yeah, well, it's definitely something to watch. You remind me of a phrase a former colleague of mine said, all the peanuts make the peanut butter, right? So I feel like that's what's happening is you're showing this groundswell of
Mm.
the average person bringing a modest gift, but then together we're creating these really major changes and major impact. And again, back to who are we supporting? Look at the organizations that are coming back and saying, without giving circles, we wouldn't be able to do this. This wouldn't have happened. But
Yes.
for the benefit or from the benefit of the giving circle, we were able to move the needle. We were making this impact and we're going to go here. And just to be able to follow that trajectory
Mhm.
is exciting, right? Because then people say, I really did do something. Like I didn't just show up and participate, but we actually did it together. We really made a difference. So yeah,
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah,
fascinating.
and I'll just say that often these groups are surfacing in these local communities, these smaller, more local, but often tend to be underfunded organizations where those dollars can go further. So it's not only about the money we're pooling, but it's about where it's going, right? To that point about the causes that are underfunded and our perspective, helping to direct funds to these areas where they are needed, but also getting them to smaller orgs where they can have an even greater impact. And the last thing I'll just note is that we are seeing more and more of these large foundations, large philanthropists getting excited about this model and actually providing matching funds. And so there are now many different matching sponsors of giving circles. We just wrapped up a campaign with the Next Door Foundation. We just launched a new one with Newman's Own Foundation. We have more on the way. So I think, that kind of unlocking some of those bigger pools of capital and helping to amplify the impact of these local groups is something also that is really just starting to pick up and is also a trend to watch, I would say, in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're seeing these companies latch on to giving circles and use those as a tool, other companies hopefully will also go, what's Newman's Own doing over here? Obviously, they're known for their charitable giving, but
Yep.
they're also pairing up with a giving circle, or as you say, the matching donors. We all know, what do matching donors want? They want other people to participate. They
Right.
want to know that other people care too. They don't want to be the only ones out there making gifts. They feel very lonely. I remember talking to a donor one time and she said, we don't want to be the only ones out there making these donations. We want to know that other people care too. So it
Right.
just seems like if you have maybe somebody with a little bit larger wealth that are willing to match, and then you have people who are coming together as individuals, it's like, what a beautiful story, like we're all doing this together and we are across the board doing things that wouldn't have been done otherwise. And it's just a terrific story to tell, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, great. Well,
Anyone
thank you for,
listening, we're happy to facilitate more of those
uh,
matching gifts out to this community.
well, to that point, how would people connect with you?
Yes, we're at grapevine.org, O-R-G. You can find us there. If you want to reach out specifically about a partnership of some kind, partnerships at grapevine.org, reach out. We'd love to hear from you. And otherwise, check out our platform, and we have lots of easy resources there to get started, find and join a giving circle, or start your own. And and lots of events and coaching workshops and things like that on the side as well that you can participate in for all the support you need.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Emily. This is super insightful. And I'm sure for anybody who didn't know what a giving circle was, they have a pretty strong sense of how important they are and how people can become participants in that. So you're always welcome to come back and tell some more stories. I'd love nothing more than you to come back and say, then they're even more powerful than they were before, Rick. Look at how much more we've moved, how much more money we've moved, how many more companies are participating, how many more matching gifts we have. Like that would be a really terrific part too.
Love it. I look forward to it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Emily.
Thank you, Rick.
That wraps up today's conversation with Emily Rasmussen. And what stands out most is just how powerful it can be when people come together with a shared purpose. Here are 3 key takeaways. First, philanthropy belongs to everyone. Giving circles show us that you don't need to be a major donor to make a meaningful impact. You just need to be willing to participate. Second, community drives generosity. When people connect, learn from one another, and share perspectives, giving becomes more intentional, more informed, and more impactful. And third, collaboration creates sustainability. By pooling resources and committing to recurring support, giving circles are helping nonprofits build more stable and resilient funding streams. So take a moment to reflect. How might you invite others into your giving journey? And what could be possible if you gave together instead of alone? Thanks for listening to Money to Give. If this conversation resonated with you, please leave a review on your preferred streaming platform. Share it with a friend or colleague, and most importantly, keep that giving feeling going. We are now broadcasting in 37 countries and growing, with 500 downloads per month and nearly 10,000 downloads to date. A reminder, this podcast is meant to be for educational purposes only. For specific advice related to your own situation, please consult an attorney, financial advisor, CPA, or other type of trusted consultant. If you're looking for fresh insights on how to give smarter, raise more money, and advise your clients in a more informed way, please subscribe to my weekly newsletter, Charitable Giving News for You. Register by going to my website, thephilanthropyguy.com. In the newsletter, you'll also read about many of our podcast guests, while also getting helpful tips and advice for nonprofits, donors, and professional advisors. Meaningful giving starts with meaningful connection, so please connect with me, Richard Peck, on LinkedIn as well. I'm proud to say that I'm nearing 10,000 connections. Until next time, let's keep making a difference together.